Is Manny Pacquiao too old to beat Errol Spence Jr.? So Manny Pacquiao is considered one of the best of all time, right, in boxing. For me, he is like up there definitely. Actually, for me, he might even be the best fighter pound for pound on the planet. You know, and if not now, in his prime at least, right? But obviously, he's old. He's older anyway. He's not really in his prime anymore. He's 40 something. He's just entered his 40s, and you know he has a fight with Errol Spence Jr. coming up in August, I believe it is, or something like that. And the big question is Manny too old to fight Errol Spence Jr.? Because a lot of people, from what I've seen, people are picking Spence to win this fight, and they're saying that he's this young lion, he's the new up and comer, and that Manny Pacquiao, he's gonna pass the torch onto this, new, not new prospect, but this young individual. I believe Spence is 30 something, or he's maybe in his late 20s. I don't know too much, but obviously Manny Pacquiao is older. Um, and that's the big question: is he too old to fight Spence? So obviously Manny Pacquiao was still old, or he was in his 40s, I believe, when he fought Thurman, or he was 39. That was 2 years ago, I believe, though, or a year and a half ago. And Manny Pacquiao, he looked good in that fight, right? And obviously, you could tell that even though Manny Pacquiao still had it in him, you could tell that he lacked, some of the reflexes he had when maybe he was like, I don't know, 21, 25, early 30s, whatever his prime. Um, but I mean, he still looked like he was, a good fight. I mean, he beat Thurman, who was, much younger, right? And was this, people were calling this guy the, one of the best welterweights at the time. I mean, he still is a good, I mean, he has a good record, this guy, right? So, I mean, it's not like he's a joke or anything. But Manny Pacquiao, he was still able to beat him, and he beat him by a close decision. I believe it was a split decision. I thought Manny won the fight, as he should have. But I mean, it was a split decision, so it is what it is. But obviously, it's 2 years later. He's been stripped of his WBA title, so he's not really fighting for his that title anymore. He's fighting for Spence's belt, and I mean, obviously, we can get into the boxing politics of everything and talk about, oh, was he supposed to be stripped? Or should he have been stripped? Or, should he have kept the title? But I'm not going to get into that too much. In my opinion, he should have kept it. I mean, look, guys, this is, COVID year, right? Or, year and a half, right? 2020 was, a terrible year for, pretty much everything. I mean, including boxing, right? I mean, you had all these fights postponed and all that, right? So, I mean, they stripped Manny because of his, inactivity. But I mean, we're in a COVID era, so I mean, does it make sense to strip someone of that title, right? When there's a pandemic going on? In my opinion, not really, right? So, but that's all I'm gonna say about that. I'm not gonna, because like I said, that's boxing politics. That's not what I'm here to talk about. So the main topic is Manny too old to fight Spence? So obviously people would say yes, he's too old. He's in his 40s, right? He's not like a grandpa age or anything, but he's like he's leaving his prime. Um in my opinion, it's hard to determine whether Pacquiao is old, because the thing is, when you look at it like this, it's not so much the number that it's not like, oh, as soon as you're 41, you're definitely out of your prime, right? Or you turn this age, you turn this number, then you don't have it anymore, right? So in my opinion, it's not so much that. It's more that, I believe people have two ages, right? One is their chronological age, which, that's the year you were born, or that's how many years you've been on this planet for, right? Say you're 25, you've been on this planet for 25 years. Say you're, I don't know, 35, you've been on this planet for 35 years. That's just the number of years you've been on this planet, right? Um, but then you have another age, and that's your biological age. Now, your biological age determines how young or how old you appear to be, right? So, and this is especially key for fighters because you have some fighters who leave their prime, you know, a lot earlier than they should. You know what I mean? I know I reference the UFC a lot, but if you look at Jose Aldo, he's not even 35, I believe, and you can tell he's. I mean, he still kind of has it, but he's not. You know, the fighter he once was. Um, and so I mean, you have people who are young who leave their who still leave their prime at a young age, right? But then you have older guys. For example, Vladimir Klitschko when he fought Anthony Joshua, right? I mean, I thought Klitschko looked great in that fight. Yeah, his chin was a bit weakened just because of his, he was on the older side and he may have, not had the reflexes, as when he was younger. But I mean, he still looked like he wasn't, slowing down significantly, right? Another fighter in the UFC is Stephen Thompson, Wonderboy. I said this in my Gilbert Burns, Stephen Thompson video that, although Stephen Thompson is like in his late 30s, he doesn't seem to be slowing down all that significantly, right? I mean, he still beat Vicente Luque, who's much younger than him and who's a good fighter. He beat Jeff Neal, who's also younger than him and a good fighter. And you had Jan Blachowicz, excuse me if I said his last name wrong, but you had him who beat Israel Adesanya recently, right? And people were saying, Adesanya was going to blow Jan out the water because Jan's, he's slower, he's older and all that. But Jan, he beat him. So the age itself, I mean, people, because like I said, people age differently. So, Thompson, he fights like he's 25. Blachowicz fights like he's, 30 something, like early 30s, right? So, I mean, it's not so much the number that counts. It's more of, can this person still fight at this particular number, right? So with Pacquiao, I mean, he looks like from the Thurman fight, but that was 2 years ago. It looks like if that Pacquiao shows up to this Errol Spence fight, then I believe that the fight will at least go to a decision. But obviously, if Pacquiao, if he has a bad training camp or any of this, then he might lose this fight, right? Obviously, a prime Pacquiao would have beaten a prime Spence, right? And people will say, oh, but Pacquiao, I mean, he was always like switching weight classes. So, I mean, how do you know that? Well, because, Pacquiao, I mean, look, he just beat Thurman, right? I mean, he didn't beat Thurman in his prime, right? Or he wasn't in his prime when he beat Thurman. And he still was able to beat this guy and, take away his title, right? So, and, some people will say, oh, but Spence is a lot bigger, he's a lot stronger, and all that. Okay. I mean, Oscar De La Hoya was a lot bigger, right? You know what I mean? And Pacquiao was still able to school him in that fight, right? Sure, I'd say Errol Spence is more talented than Oscar De La Hoya, and he's a better fighter. But I mean, Manny Pacquiao, he's fought better fighters, right? He's fought guys like Floyd Mayweather Jr. Which that's a controversial fight in itself. right? Um, you know what I mean? And he's beating another guy, Miguel Cotto, another great fighter. So I don't know. It's the way I see it. Manny Pacquiao. This is nothing really new to him, right? The only thing is just his, whether he still has it in him is what I'm saying, right? Oh yeah, he also beat Antonio Margarito, and he was a lot taller than Manny. So, I mean, the size difference, it doesn't really matter in my opinion. It's just more that, how this, if Manny still has it in him, right? So the answer to the question of this video is who knows, right? Who knows if he's too old, right? He's 40 something, right? He's obviously older than when he was in the Keith Thurman fight. But has he changed or has he aged significantly since then? In my opinion, I don't think he would, just because it's only been 2 years and that's like nothing. But honestly, like no one knows. So yeah, man. I mean, if to be honest, if Manny Pacquiao shows up the same way he showed up in the Thurman fight, I believe he can beat Spence. Like I'm not even joking. I mean, that's a whole video in itself, but I think Manny Pacquiao could still beat Errol Spence Jr. I think Errol Spence Jr. He's very flat-footed. He relies on his strength and his size to create angles and land shots that way, right? Where he clinches you up and then he tries to create angles and then land all these body shots and combinations. He can fight on the back foot. I mean, he fought Sean Porter on the back foot. And, that was a close fight. I personally thought Errol Spence Jr. won that fight. But it wasn't, it was very close. I had it 114 to 113 for Spence. I think it's that knockdown that secured the win for Errol Spence. So, but, if someone said that Sean Porter won that fight or that it was a draw, I honestly, I wouldn't have a problem with it because it was a very close fight. So, yeah, man, I don't know. This will be an interesting fight. I want Pacquiao to win, and I do think he can win. But it's just whether, if Manny Pacquiao is a bad training camp and he gets, injured or something or any of that, then it could be a bad night for him when they do fight. But I'm pretty sure most people want Manny to win because of his story, the fact that he's pound for pound one of the greats. You know what I mean? And honestly, I would love to see him win. I don't want to see him fight Crawford after this. I don't think that'd be a good decision. I think if he beats Spence, he should just retire because he would have nothing to prove after that. But with this fight, yeah, man. To be honest, I think Manny Pacquiao I think he could get the upset. To be honest with you. So yeah, this is it's gonna be a great fight. I can't wait. And yeah, that's sort of my analysis on it. So the answer to this question is no. I don't believe Manny Pacquiao is too old to fight Spence, but I don't know that for a fact. So we'll just have to see. Anyway, this video has been going on for too long. Thank you guys for listening. Let me know what your thoughts are on this fight and if Manny's too old. And I'll see you later. Take care and peace.